So I recently purchased a Microsoft Surface Pro 9 for my work, and I also have an M2 12.9-inch iPad Pro. Now these are very similar devices, and you could say to some extent they're direct competitors, so I thought a comparative review might be useful. Okay, so you can see from the specs that they are rather similar. So how do they compare in terms of display and performance and so on? Well, regarding the displays, they're both excellent. They really are high resolution, high quality displays on both devices. Similar in size and resolution and PPI as we've seen. Differing in aspect ratio, the Surface Pro is 3:2, which I think is better for sort of office type work and perhaps web browsing, whereas the iPad Pro is more 4:3, better for videos, for example. But both excellent. Both touch screen, of course, and really I can't say that necessarily one is better than the other, except I would say that the color accuracy on the iPad Pro is superior. It has a higher color gamut, P3, compared to the Surface Pro's sRGB. And I do think the color accuracy is superior. I find the Surface Pro display can be a little oversaturated when I notice it when I'm watching videos on YouTube, for example, or looking at photographs. It's still an excellent display, but I do think that the factory calibration, I haven't calibrated either device manually, but in terms of the factory calibration, I do think that the iPad is better. What about the keyboards that go with them and the trackpads? Well, again, both very good. I like typing on both of them. I have no particular preference there. The signature keyboard for the Surface Pro is certainly lighter and thinner, and therefore not quite as stable when you're using it on your lap as the Magic Keyboard. That's definitely better. But certainly typing on them is fine. Trackpads, again, both very good. I would have to, as always, put the Apple Trackpad as being better. That's typical of Apple trackpads, of course. They are very, very good. But the one on the Surface Pro is fine. What about the pens? There's the Slim Pen 2 on the Surface Pro and the Apple Pencil 2 on the iPad Pro. Well, again, they're both excellent. They both work very, very well. They have virtually zero latency. They both have pressure sensitivity and I think it's called tilt support. They both support the hover feature, where as you hover the pen over the screen, you can see where it's going to be applied. The Surface has had that for a while, the Surface Pen. The Apple Pencil 2 has it now, but only on an M2 iPad Pro like mine, an M2 device. So I like using both of them for taking notes. I do prefer using taking notes on my iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil because the iPad Pro is lighter and certainly better designed to be used as a tablet than the Surface. But they both, if you do a lot of drawing, I'm not an artist, I don't do any particular drawing. As I say, I use the pencil for note-taking, handwritten notes and drawing diagrams. They're absolutely fine for that, but both would be excellent for drawing, and you'd be quite happy using either. Battery life does differ on the two devices. It's definitely superior, in my experience, on the iPad Pro. The M2 processor, of course, being one of the new Apple Silicon chips, has excellent performance to power ratio. So it achieves its highest performance with relatively light power usage. And hence that means that, firstly, the iPad Pro very rarely gets warm, certainly not hot, and the battery life is excellent. On the Surface Pro, it's not as good, I'm afraid. If you're using the device just for, web browsing, email, some office work, spreadsheets, word processing, and so on, then the battery life is acceptable. But if you're using it for watching videos or for video conferencing, for example, then I found the battery life to be poor. For example, I recently had a Teams meeting that lasted for an hour, and the battery went down from just under 100% to about 25%. I was amazed at how much the battery went down. And the reason was that the device did get quite warm, not hot, but certainly warmed up, and the fans came on, and the net result was the battery drained significantly. Now, of course, the Surface Pro can, of course, be operated on mains power, the iPad. The iPad can, but you wouldn't normally do that. Of course, you normally just plug it in or to charge up the battery. But you can operate the Surface Pro on mains power, and then, of course, the battery drain is irrelevant. Well, it won't drain, presumably. But if you're wanting to, of course, to take the Surface Pro with you, and it's designed primarily as a portable device, then, of course, battery life is a significant factor. And my advice would be, if you're planning to use it away from home, then see if you can plug it in somewhere, because you'll find that my experience was that battery drain was very significant when you're using it for video conferencing. The operating systems obviously differ. It's Windows 11, the full desktop version on the Surface Pro. It's iPad OS on the iPad Pro, and I'm currently using the latest version, 17. Now, I have no particular preference for either because I use the machines for different purposes. It's nice to have a full desktop version of Windows 11 on the Surface Pro. That means, of course, you can run full desktop applications, the full desktop version of Microsoft Office, of Adobe applications, and so on. Whereas on the iPad, you have to use the iPad versions. And there's no doubt that when you comes to, for example, Microsoft Office, the Windows desktop versions are superior to the iPad versions. The iPad versions have got better and are very good, but they're not as good or as powerful as the desktop versions. So if you're wanting to run full desktop applications, then of things like Office or Adobe, or, Photoshop, Lightroom, and so on, then the Surface Pro would suit you better. But if you are happy with the versions on iPad, and if you use your iPad primarily for other things like photo editing and media creation and so on, then that's perfectly fine too. So I'm happy using both. I'm not a person who only uses Windows or only uses Mac and iPad and OS. I'm quite happy using both, and I think the operating systems work very well on each device. What about overall performance? Well, again, it's very good on both. I have no real complaints in either case. I think the iPad Pro is generally snappier and more powerful in running its applications than, say, on the Surface. That's not to say that the Surface runs slowly or the applications don't run well on it. They do. It has a 12th gen i5. That's not the latest. I think the latest is 13th, or is it even 14th now? But it's certainly more than fast enough to run Microsoft Office, to run browsers and email, and indeed it will run Photoshop and Lightroom and so on. I haven't actually tried any video editing on it, and I certainly haven't tried any games. I suspect it might be a little laggy for those, but for the purposes I use it for, the performance is perfectly acceptable. Equally, I have absolutely no complaints about the iPad Pro. The M2 chip, of course, is very fast, very powerful. everything runs beautifully smooth and quickly on that. So performance on both machines, for me, is perfectly acceptable. An issue I touched on earlier is portability. Both devices are, of course, designed as to be taken with you to work or to a coffee shop, to work outside of the office or the home, and they are both very portable. Then they're not huge devices or particularly weighty. When it comes to the devices on their own, without the attached keyboards, then the iPad Pro is definitely the lighter of the two and the more portable. The Surface Pro is I wouldn't call it heavy, but it certainly is a lot heavier, or noticeably heavier than the iPad Pro. Conversely, once you attach the keyboards, the situation is reversed. The combination of the Surface Pro and the signature keyboard is definitely lighter than the iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard. And that's because of, obviously, of the differing keyboards. I think I mentioned before, the Surface keyboard, the signature keyboard, is quite thin and light. The Magic Keyboard, if you've seen one or held one, is actually quite a sturdy, quite heavy keyboard. So, so if you're planning on taking the device with you to use primarily as a laptop, then you'll find the Surface Pro plus signature keyboard combination is more portable than the iPad Pro plus Magic Keyboard combination. But if you're wanting to take them to use as a tablet, it's the other way around. The iPad Pro is definitely lighter, and as I mentioned before, works much better as a tablet than the Surface Pro. Not a surprise, given that it was originally designed purely as a tablet. So what's my overall conclusion in regard to these two devices? Well, I think it's clear from what I've been saying that I don't favour one over the other. I like them both. I find them both very useful for the purposes I want them for. They're both excellent. They're similar in price, I think, and certainly when you add the keyboards on and the pen, of course, you do have to buy both of those separately, which does add to the cost. The signature keyboard is actually a lot cheaper than the Magic Keyboard. That's really quite expensive for the iPad Pro 12.9 inch. The combination of the iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard is probably more expensive than the Surface Keyboard plus Surface Pro, and the same when you throw in the pens. But they're both excellent machines. I like them both. I use them both all the time. It depends, of course, if you're thinking of buying one or the other, on your use case. If you want full desktop applications of things like Office and Adobe applications, then you're better for the Surface Pro. If you're happy with the iPad versions and you intend to use your iPad primarily as a tablet, then you'd be best going for that.